When you study the Gospel of Luke, a completely new section begins at Luke 9:51, and it runs a whole deal right through to Luke 19. And all the different sections are all designed by the Gospel writer to lead to the cross. It's a Samaritan village where people did not welcome him. And we note the reaction of James and John. They really wanted it sorted out. We read in chapter 9 of Luke, verses 54 through to 55. When the disciples James and John saw this, they asked, "Lord, do you want us to call fire down from heaven to destroy them?" But Jesus turned and rebuked them. Well, what a reaction. But, you know, it wasn't the way of Jesus. We're told that the people's reaction were many and varied, because later on we're told that in verse 57, as they were walking along the road, a man said to him, "I'll follow you wherever you go." And it goes on, and he talks about foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head, Jesus said. He said to another man, "Follow me." But he replied, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." And Jesus said to him, "Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God." He said to another man, still another, "I'll follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family." Jesus replied, "No one who puts a hand to the plough and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." Well, there are three prospective disciples. One makes the first aware it'll not be easy. The second may appear harsh, but not in a way in which Jesus is saying the family doesn't matter. The last thing that Jesus says throughout the Gospel is, "Don't worry about your family, you can forget them." But I think that the words that really are coming through powerfully in here is the calling of Jesus takes precedence in our lives. And the third wants permission to say goodbye. It's not unreasonable, is it? But Jesus says there really isn't time for that. And the text of the gospel call to the disciples is something that I think all of us can learn from. It's in verse 62. "No one who puts his hand to the plough and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God." Wow, what a powerful calling for all of us. Whatever we do, we've heard earlier on in the show about the importance of some people setting aside their lives to help people who are being bullied. We know that many people respond to the call of Jesus in those formal ways. But I think all of us have some role, some place in our lives that can be given over to him. And it has to really be a priority. Because we're told that Jesus set his face to Jerusalem. He let everything get into the perspective of what the end story was going to be. And we know that the powerful end story is the cross. That's where Jesus is heading. And if we're going to follow him, if we're going to be people who in our day, not only in the days of the first disciples, to be modern day disciples, then we have to have that determination and that willingness to count the cost, to give our all to him, and to recognize that there will be times in our lives when it may not mean leaving family, but it may be something that really cuts deep into us. And we realize it says, this is the priority of your life. And for the disciples, well, what a journey they're on. They're going to feel the cost very much. And we're told, aren't we, in the Gospels, that some of them fled into the night, one of them betrays him, one of them denies him. It's going to be a real test of their discipleship. But I suspect these verses are most powerful in the context of the early church, in the context of those who heard these words for the very first time. As this story was told, I can imagine disciples, if they were in congregations or small groups that were meeting, would nod and say, "Oh yes, we remember him talking like that." And there would already be those that were having to count the cost in terms of their own lives, in terms of the way that they were living out their lives with persecution in Jerusalem, scattered congregations, knowing the cost. And the cost of Christian discipleship in the realm of bullying, for example, may mean standing up in a place for what you believe to be right. We need to create communities in which we're free of some of those things and set free to be a community that cares for one another. And that is a real priority. That is part of what it means to live out the good news, to do a word and deed ministry where we hear these words of Jesus and put them into practice day by day. It's a costly business if you and I are going to follow Jesus, if we're going to be amongst those people. And Jesus says, if you set your hand to the plough, if you've begun the work, if you got in there to do it, you can't turn back. It's that important because it's a call to the disciples and all of us.